إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Previously, we did a presentation pertaining to Zakah before Ramadan, in which we went through some details pertaining to the Zakah of wealth of money, the zakah of gold and silver, and the zakah of sales item. And we went into a very great details pertaining to some of these issues, and some of them we covered briefly. But in this presentation, inshallah, my intent is to present a summary pertaining to the zakah of our wealth, a brief summary that will be sufficient, inshallah ta'ala, for most individuals, as those videos and those presentation before was quite lengthy. So in this presentation, inshallah ta'ala, I will give a brief summary pertaining to the zakah and what is sufficient for someone to do in order to pay his zakah. I will not go into the different options a person may have. I will give a simple solution for different scenarios, and a simple way a person can pay his zakah, and it will be sufficient for him without going in any details as to the different way in which he can pay the zakah. As for those details and for all of the branch issues pertaining to each topic, the other videos, they are available, inshallah ta'ala. So in this presentation, inshallah ta'ala, we'll do a quick review of the conditions for the obligation of zakah and the types of wealth zakah is due from. And then we will do a brief presentation of the zakah of gold and silver and some related issues, the zakah of money and currency and some of its related issues. These similar topics that we covered before, but everything will be concise, very concise, inshallah ta'ala. The zakah of wealth gained during the year. In the previous presentation, we covered the different ways you can deal with wealth gained during the year. In this presentation, inshallah, we'll only present one way, one simple solution in dealing with wealth gained during the year, and some random issues pertaining to zakah and the zakah of sales item or related issues, and who can be given the zakah, inshallah ta'ala. Maybe for who can be given zakah, we may not cover it in this presentation, as it was covered in the last presentation we did pertaining to zakah. So in order to keep it concise, we may leave out who may be given the zakah, inshallah ta'ala. We will see how the time goes, bi'ithnillah. So the condition for the obligation of zakah, briefly, as we went into details before, but briefly, as we mentioned, Islam, the person must be a Muslim. The wealth has to be zakat certified, meaning not all of your wealth you have to give zakat on. Only certain wealth, if you have it, like money, gold, silver, and sales item, and these are things that we will deal with, and other wealth like some cattle and crops and so for farmers. But other things like your home and your books and your table and so, there are no zakat that is due upon those things. So the wealth has to be zakat certified. The next condition is that you have to be completely own that wealth. You have to be complete. You have to completely own that wealth and be in complete control of that wealth. And we mentioned that this will exempt wealth that is lost, or endowments, or public wealth, or and certain type of debts, not all type of debts, and well seized or hold by authority, etc. And here we will not go through any details pertaining to debt during this presentation. You can refer back to our previous presentation for that. And next, this wealth has to reach nisab. That is the minimum threshold for which zakah is obligatory. The minimum threshold for which zakah is obligatory. So if you have money, for example, you don't have to necessarily pay zakah so long as you do not reach the nisab. But if you reach the nisab, then you have to pay the zakah of that money, and the wealth must maintain the nisab for 1 hijri year. The wealth must maintain the nisab for 1 hijri year, except for fruits and crops, and those we will not be dealing with. Okay, so the zakat of gold and silver. As we mentioned, the zakah of gold is 85 grams and the zakah of silver is 595 grams. Meaning, if you own 85 grams of gold or more, then you have to pay zakah on that gold once it is with you for 1 hijri year or more. So let's say you have 85 grams of gold today in Dhul Hijjah, and next year Dhul Hijjah reach, and you still have the 85 grams of gold, or you have 90 grams of gold, or 100 grams of gold. The main thing, it does not drop below the nisab. Then when next year Muharram reach, 1 year pass, then you pay zakah on that 85 grams of gold. Similarly, for the silver, 595 grams of gold, 595 grams of silver. If you have 595 grams of silver, 1 hijri year pass and it is still with you, it does not drop below the nisab, you have to pay zakah on that gold or on that silver. Now, how is it you calculate the zakah? So you calculate the zakah for your gold and your silver and your money. Once it reaches the nisab at the end of the year, you just divide the wealth by 40, and the amount that comes out, that is what you have to give to those who are deserving of zakah. So, for example, someone has 120 grams of gold for an entire year. The zakah due will be 120 divided by 40, which is 3 grams. So 3 grams of gold, you take it and give it to the poor, for example. Similarly, if someone has 600 grams of silver for an entire year, as we mentioned before, the zakah of silver, 595. So 600 grams it passed the threshold. So long as he has 600 grams and it does not drop below 595, at the end of the year, he just divided by 40, 15 grams, and he gave it to those who are deserving of zakah. Now, the nisab of money. Most of us, our zakat is from money, the money we have in our pocket or the money we have in the bank. So now the nisab of money, in order to calculate the nisab of money, in our previous presentation, we went into some details, but here we will just mention one thing, and that is using gold. So using gold, calculating the nisab of money, you will use the same nisab of gold. And we mentioned the reason why we choose gold in our previous presentation. We mentioned some details and the evidence pertaining to why we choose gold. So the nisab of gold we mentioned is 85 grams. So we use the nisab of gold to determine the nisab of currency, the nisab of money, of paper money. So let's say 1 gram of gold in the market is worth $55. Then the nisab for money will be 85, because 85 is the nisab of gold, times 55 to know the equivalent of it in money, in dollars. So $4,675 will be the nisab of money. And the among due, same thing. In order to calculate how much you have to pay, you just divide it by 40. So the zakat due, let's say someone has $5,000 for an entire year. He divided $5,000 by 40, and that is the amount he will have to give to the poor people, $125. So $5,000 is more than the nisab, more than 4,675. So long as the year pass and he does not drop below the nisab, he pays zakah. If your money drop below the nisab, then the year cuts off. Whenever it reach back the nisab, you start a new count again. Now, money and currency, we mentioned combining money and currency. Money and combining gold and silver with money. As we mentioned before, money and currency takes the place and the ruling of gold. Right? Money and currency takes the ruling of gold. That is why we use the nisab of gold in order to calculate the nisab for money. We use the equivalent of gold in order to calculate the nisab of money. So money and currency takes the place and the ruling of gold. Thus, it is treated as gold, as in the case of the nisab and calculating the among due. Therefore, money is combined with gold when determining the nisab of one's wealth and calculating the zakah. So as we mentioned, money and gold is the same ruling. So if you have money, you have $100, $1,000 cash, and you have a bar of gold next to you, those two things take the same ruling. So when you're calculating your zakah, you have to calculate the worth of that bar of gold and add it to that $1,000 to see whether or not you have the nisab. And if you have the nisab, you divide that full amount, the worth of that bar of gold, plus the cash that you have, divide that full amount by 40 in order to determine how much is it that you need to give in zakah. So for example, someone has 70 grams of gold along with $2,000 for a period of 1 year. And as we mentioned, the nisab of gold, right, is 85 grams. So this 70 grams of gold by itself does not reach nisab. The 70 grams of gold by itself does not reach nisab. And $2,000 by itself does not reach nisab. 70 grams of gold by itself does not reach nisab because the nisab of gold is 85 grams. And $2,000 does not reach nisab because the nisab of money is 85 grams times 55, which is equal to 4,675, as we mentioned, as we demonstrated before. But when you combine the two together, because this gold now is worth 3,850, and you combine that to the $2,000 you have, you reach 5,850. In other words, your money, your wealth, your total wealth reach the nisab. So you have to pay zakat and this full amount by dividing by 40, and you give out to the poor 146.25. $146.25. But you do not combine gold and money to the worth of any silver that you may have. Whatever silver you may have, you calculate that separately. Now, wealth gain during the year. Before dealing with wealth gain or earn during the year, there are two things we must take into consideration. One, when determining the nisab, all of one's wealth of the same type is taken into consideration, no matter when or how it's earned or it's gained. So when you're determining the nisab, right, all of one's wealth of the same type. So in other words, you will look wealth of the same type, meaning they have the same nisab. So for example, as we mentioned, gold and cash, gold and money, currency has the same nisab has the same ruling. So you look at all of your gold and all of your currency. And also, what takes the ruling of gold and currency in the same category is things that you are selling. Anything that you purchase or you gain for the purpose of selling and you are selling it, as we will mention shortly, all of that takes the same ruling of gold. So, in other words, amongst the wealth that we have, three things are in the same category: your currency, your goal, and if you are a business person, the items that you have on sale, all of those things are look at with one eye. You look at all of those things with one eye. They all take the same ruling. So when you're determining the nisab, you have to look at how many money cash you have, the current the goal you have, and the sale items that you have. Look at the worth of it totally, and you calculate your zakat from that. If you're not a business person and you just have gold and cash, you look at all of your gold and all of your cash to calculate the zakat. If you do not have gold and you're not a business person, the only thing you have is cash, then you have no worries. And if you're a business person and you only have cash, look at the amount of the worth of your sales item and the worth of the amount of cash you have, combine it together and you calculate the zakat from that. And the year is counted from the first time your general wealth of the same type reaches the nisab. And any additional wealth will either follow that year or be counted from its own time gain. So now, the second thing is the year. As we mentioned, two conditions of zakat is the nisab, and the second one is that the year, one Hijri year, has to pass on that wealth. Now, when you are checking if the Hijri year, when to start counting that Hijri year, as you mentioned, your wealth has to reach the nisab when you start counting. But you look at your total wealth. So let's start with this basic person. The basic person has only cash. So whenever his cash reach the nisab, and as we mentioned, we use 4,000. Like for example, using this calculation, the nisab is 4,675. So whenever your wealth reach 4,675, that is when you make a note and you start counting the year from that. If you only have cash. Now let's say you have cash and you have gold. So whenever your combined wealth of cash and gold reach a worth of 4,675, you start counting your year. Let's say you have cash, you have gold, and you have sale items. Whenever the total amount reach 4,675, that is when you start counting the year. And most of the time, that time will be whenever you gain it. So for example, a person starts when going to business today, he takes some money and he buy cars, for example, to sell, or he buys some books to sell. Most of the time, the items that he's selling will be of a large worth more than the nisab. So from the time he gained that wealth, most of the time his wealth will already be above the nisab. So you look, so whenever your total wealth of the same type, and we mentioned in this presentation, the wealth of the same type is the gold, the currency, and the sales item. Silver is a different type. You look at it separately. It has its own year, it has its own nisab, its own starting point. Everything is different with the silver. But you look at your wealth, your goal, and your sales item under one category. So now you start counting when your general wealth of the same type reaches the nisab. Now any additional wealth will either follow that year or be counted from its own year or its own time gain. Now in the previous presentation, we went into details showing the two different ways to calculate the wealth gain during the year. But in this presentation, we will just give the easiest solution for everyone. Those who just want a simple way to calculate their zakat. Now, let's say you have just money. Now, you're just dealing with money. So if you're just dealing with money, you'd have a paycheck you're receiving. So after a while, after 2-3 months of your paycheck, you reach the nisab. Some people after 1 week, some people after 1 month, they reach the nisab. So from that time you reach the nisab, you start counting your year. Now the next paycheck you receive after reaching the nisab is an additional wealth gained during the year after reaching the nisab. So the easiest thing to do, instead of writing down a different date for each paycheck, and then the following year, every week you end up paying zakah, or every month you end up paying zakah, what you do, the easiest way to do it is to pay zakat of your total wealth when the first time reach. So for example, someone has $5,000 in Muharram, right? So he reached the nisab. Then he invested in it and gained a profit of $4,000 in Rajab, right? And then in Ramadan, he received $2,000. So he has $5,000, he invests and he gain a profit. So he still has the capital 5,000 plus 4,000, which is 9. And then he receive a gift, 2,000, 11. So when next Muharram reach, the easiest thing for him to do is just pay zakat and the full 11,000. The full 11,000, and his zakat will be sufficient, and that will be sufficient for him in paying his zakat, because it's permissible for you to pay in advance. So like that, you will be paying this 4,000, the zakat due on this 4,000 and the zakat due on the 2,000 in advance the month. But it's not permissible. It's not permissible to delay the zakat that was due in Muharram until Rajab or until Ramadan. And this is a mistake many people they make. And the scholars, they spoke about this. Sheikh, you have the Sheikh Uthaymeen, he spoke about it. Sheikh Abdulaziz bin Baz, and also a fatwa from the Lajna ad-Da'ima, the permanent committee for fatwa in Saudi Arabia. They mention this issue that it is not permissible for you to delay the zakah without a reason. And one of the reasons they say delaying in it that is not permissible is delaying it for Ramadan. As many people, they want to delay it for the virtue of Ramadan. But zakah is something that is due throughout the year. Zakah is due throughout the year. And the poor people, they are in need of zakah throughout the year. So whenever your zakah is due, you have to give the zakah, whether it is Ramadan or before Ramadan. You cannot delay it until Ramadan because you want to give your zakah in Ramadan. One of the permissible reasons for delaying, maybe you are traveling and the time reached for you to pay zakah, you do not have anyone trusted in order to pay the zakah, then in that case it's permissible for you to delay it until you reach back home. Or if you have a poor relative who you want to give the zakah but he is not around at the time, so you delay your zakah until he is back in order to give him the zakah, since he is a relative and so on. But delaying it for Ramadan or for a virtuous time is not permissible, and you never know what is going to happen if you're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before giving out what is compulsory upon you to give out. The zakah of sales item, as we mentioned, the sales item takes the same ruling of gold and the same ruling of currency, and the conditions of paying zakah on sales item, which sale items you have to pay zakah upon. We mentioned the item must be owned by choice. This will exempt inheritance, because inheritance, once someone passed away and you are amongst those who will inherit, without your choice, that wealth go towards you, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who distributed the inheritance. The item must be owned with the intention of trade. And this will exempt things like inheritance also, because so the item, you have to be that you purchase that item for the intention of sale. So let's say you purchase a car to drive for your personal use, and then you do not like the car anymore and you decide to sell the car. You do not have to pay zakah on that car because you have not owned it with the intention of trade. And the value of the item must reach the nisab. As we mentioned, the sales item takes the same ruling of wealth and the same ruling of gold. So when looking at the nisab of your sales item, you have to take into consideration what money you have, and if you have any goal, all of that you add together to determine the nisab. With regards to the intention, there's a lot of details with regards to the intention and changing your intention. Now, in the previous presentation we did, you can go back to that and find some details pertaining to the intention, how it affects your zakah. If you change your intention, if you decide to you buy a car to use and then you decide to sell it, and then you do not worry you want to sell it, you decide to keep it, and then you choose to sell it back again. All of that, we mentioned some details pertaining to that in our previous presentation. And then the item must be in possession for 1 year. And as we mentioned, this 1 year is also considered with your general wealth, because sales item takes the same ruling of gold and money. So when you're looking at the year, if the sales item was an outcome of your money that you previous had, or a goal that you previous had, you use it to purchase that sale item, then the year continues from that previous wealth. And all of this condition, we went into some details in our previous presentation. Intent here is just to give a brief summary, inshallah ta'ala, pertaining to what we covered before. So this is just same thing that we mentioned. The sales item are considered general wealth. So therefore, it takes the ruling of money regarding the zakat in calculating the nisab and among Jew. Also, in calculating the zakah of sale item, it is added to whatever monetary wealth a person has, along with gold, to determine the nisab and the amount due. So, for example, if someone is selling bikes worth $2,000, and he has, along with the bikes, $1,000 in cash and also gold worth $2,750. In other words, he has 50 grams of gold, all for a period of 1 year. Then his zakat will be calculated from the total value of his wealth. So the total value of his wealth is 5,750, which is more than the nisab. So he has to pay zakat. If 1 year pass upon this, he just divide it by 40, and the amount will be 143.75 cents. That is what he will be giving to the poor. The worth. Now, how to calculate the worth of the sales item? The worth of the sales item is calculated at the end of this year, when zakah is due, based on the selling price at that time. So when the end of the year reach, 1 year passed, now the time for zakah, the time for giving the zakah reach, you look at the worth of that sale items with the selling price, because that sale item is representing money for you. And the money is how much you're selling it for. You're not getting how much you buy it for. The money that you will have in your hand is how much you are selling it for. So you're looking at the selling price. It is permissible to pay zakah from the actual sale item. It will be of benefit to the recipient receiving the zakah. If not, then its value is paid in cash. So if you are selling, for example, clothes, right, then it's permissible for you to give the actual clothes in zakah, if that will be of benefit. But if the poor, they do not have any need for clothes, then you give the worth of that clothes in zakah. If the sale item is of no benefit to the recipient and the owner has no extra money to pay the zakat from, so you're selling clothes and you don't have any money, you didn't buy any clothes, he keeps a record of his zakah due for each year he was unable to pay, and then he pay as soon as it is possible. So this in brief are some of the main topics pertaining, or some of the main issues pertaining to the zakah for the general person, if he doesn't come into any complication or any debts or so. This is basically what he needs to know regarding the zakah. And the intent of this video apart is to give a brief summary of what we did before, and also to make it easy for the general person to understand the zakah, as the previous videos, they were quite lengthy and in some details We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us from that which He taught us and to increase us in knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for whatever mistakes we may have made, and to correct us and to teach us and to increase us in knowledge. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.